The Russian defense industry never ceases to amaze. The fetish of 2024 in Russia has become not the development of new weapons and equipment, but the reworking of Soviet models. Moreover, the further it goes, the more unpromising they become.
Therefore, as you can clearly see, this machine looks rather strange.
Four-tracked tanks, Soviet crop dusters, the latest novelties in tank barbecue construction, in short, everything with which the Russian Federation amuses the world's arms companies. And we will discuss today in Arsenal. Well, how could we do without them? These sheds on tracks have literally become a symbol of Russian tank operations. Time and again, they pile more and more scrap metal on top of Soviet equipment, hoping that this will finally protect the crew.
This is how the T-80 tank looks inside this metal shell. Grids have been installed here to allow the tank to ventilate a little. Here we see solid steel sheets, 8 millimeters thick. Well, the tankers came up with and installed this kind of makeshift bed.
But these hanging beds for the occupiers inside the shell of the makeshift shelter painfully resemble barbecue grills. And the claimed ventilating grids, which can't withstand any criticism, are certainly no obstacle for Ukrainian drones.
And this only works on the condition that the drone is remotely piloted. If the drone uses elements of automatic control, meaning target acquisition, exploration, or for example elements of artificial intelligence for targeting, then such means are absolutely ineffective.
But, of course, the propaganda remains silent about this, as well as the fact that the crews of such machines have long been dubbed kamikazes among the military.
Basically, as I said, it's mostly a tank that is doomed. It is destroyed first. Very often, these are precisely the tanks in which the crew does not survive in most cases.
At the same time, military analysts almost unanimously state that such a tank will not be able to conduct a full-fledged battle. The clumsy, bulky, and awkward Russian T-80 with a grill and barbecue on the turret is only good as a target.
The tank commander call sign Mickey likes the result. The view is limited, but for assault actions, it's just right.
And that's true. For the Kremlin's meat assaults, it's just what is needed.
Those very tank hangers onto which a large amount of metal is welded and which essentially act as a locomotive that clears the way for the main strike group and often the crew doesn't survive.
But soon a worthy competitor to these sheds may appear on the battlefield, naturally, in terms of the number of memes. The Russians decided to resurrect the Object 279, a tank once designed in Leningrad with 4 tracks. The development from Stalin's era was ultimately rejected by him. By all accounts, the tank seemed to be excellent. In reality, it turned out to be completely unsuitable.
This was a forced design decision. Well, firstly, the idea of 4 tracks was explored in 1947-1948 to increase the vehicle's mobility. Secondly, the layout and appearance of the hull were, let's say, technically designed to enhance the tank's armor and protection. Essentially, the tank employed optimal armor angles to deflect enemy shells. That's why this vehicle looks quite strange.
Strange is an understatement. This Frankenstein, which was supposed to lead the USSR in the Cold War, was simply laughed at in the West.
For the Germans, Americans, the British, and the French, it was simply a shock when they saw it.
The impracticality on the battlefield, the complexity of repairs, the unusual chassis, the ammunition supply, only 24 shells. None of this bothers the Kremlin anymore, as it did was half a century ago. Object 279 is seriously planned to be thrown into battle against modern Abrams and Leopards. After all, a tank developed in the USSR a year and for nuclear war, no less, cannot be bad, by definition.
Tank units were supposed to move through all this so-called peaceful atom-plowed field.
at the site of the explosions.
The principle of modernizing Soviet developments from the 50s and Russian aviation was touched upon. The latest solution presented against Ukrainian drones turned out to be the veteran crop duster Yak-52.
It is quite a light and simplified aircraft. It could typically be equipped with onboard weaponry. It was about, for example, an onboard machine gun, or typically to drop some small, relatively light munitions.
However, one cannot expect anything more serious. Soviet engineers tried to turn the Yak-52 into a full-fledged combat aircraft, but the project was closed back in 1983. Due to its weight of less than 1.5 tons, firing rockets from pylons is completely ruled out. The wings would simply tear off. And when attempting to attach large caliber machine guns to the Yak-52, the aircraft would practically hover in the air and sway significantly, resulting in almost zero shooting accuracy. But this does not stop the Russians. At the Aviastrotel Design Bureau, they have already announced plans to equip the veteran of small aviation with a new multifunctional display, upgrade the avionics, and add electronic warfare systems. In words, it seems that the updates will cost more than the plane itself. In reality, it's just another set of makeshift developments claiming to be unparalleled.
As a rule, it's not about replacing, say, the instrument panel or any onboard systems. Usually it's just about installing an external module. We often see this on Russian helicopters, where the pilots actually understand that their onboard equipment produced back in the Soviet Union is not accurate. They separately purchase these commercially intended GPS receivers and simply bolt them next to the control panel.
However, experts say that it is still possible to combat drones with the Yak-52. Ukraine, incidentally, was the first to start doing this. In the Odessa region, defense forces shot down about a dozen drones from such an aircraft, after which they stopped publicizing the information. Now the Russians have simply stolen the idea. And all attempts to additionally equip old planes with new gadgets are nothing more than a desire to grab more from the Russian military budget.
The main mechanism will be the same as that used by Ukrainian Yak-52 pilots. This is essentially the use of handheld firearms. When the cockpit canopy opens, the corresponding crew member simply, in manual mode, flies to the necessary distance and can just shoot down the drone in the air through the open canopy.
However, one should not expect that the Yak-52 will now be widely patrolling the Russian expanses. In total, there were about 300 of these birds in Russia. 5 years ago, about 100 remained in service. Meanwhile, half of them remain in private hands, like flight schools. This results in a classic Russian problem. On paper, 300, but in reality, 30.
But to say that this is a systematic solution that can be scaled across all of Russia, well, is not the case. There are few of these planes. They are no longer produced. And in general, most likely it will be about using a limited number of machines, possibly a few dozen.
When Russia attempts to do something from scratch on its own in any field, it turns out like this.
Well, this is certainly the car of the future. Interesting, I haven't seen anything like this. We need to stop here and take a look.
Zubilo, as it was named by its creators, according to the engineer's concept, is a remote installation for conducting fire. However, in the presented equipment, the remote control module is missing. As a result, it turned out to be a Tachanka from the times of Nestor Makhno, in a somewhat new style. The practicality and reliability of the Zubilo is evidenced by the fact that, although it was presented at last year's exhibition, it never made it to the front. Apparently, this coffin on wheels, following Russian tradition, should stand in a museum for half a century before the military takes notice of it. Did you like the video? Then don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to our new Arsenal channel. The link is in the description below the video.